Welcome to the Grow2Market podcast. And I'm delighted that I'm joined today by Rebecca from SureHR. And Rebecca is someone that in fractional teams we've known for a while. Actually, Rebecca helps us out with a number of things we do around our HR activities. So just before we kick off with the conversation, I'd like to give you a minute to introduce yourself.
Hello, hiya. I'm Rebecca from SureHR, and I specialise with working with small businesses in the UK to get their HR up and running, make sure they're legally compliant, and really build strong and motivated teams.
Excellent. Thank you. And I think it's really important for us as a business to recognize that there are different models out there for resourcing. I mean, in fractional teams, as the name suggests, we provide fractional support, so it is a little bit like an outsourcing model, although we like to think of ourselves as a bit better than that. Certainly, we are an alternative to in-house permanent hiring. But actually, what we want to talk about today is mainly about in-house. And I should just mention at the start that a lot of what we'll hear today is really going to be focused on the UK market in particular, due to legislation. But actually, there's a lot we're going to be talking about, which is going to be relevant to other markets around the world as well. So, I'd just like to maybe start off our chat about resourcing. And really, lots changed actually over the last few months. We've got a new government in the UK, particularly. What's that done for the recruitment and in-house permanent market?
Yeah, it is. It's bringing about a lot of changes with the new legislation that's coming into place that small businesses really need to be aware of. And that really is going to be quite impactful next year in terms of, you may have heard on the news, the changes to day one rights for employees, and changes to flexible working, changes to 0 hours. And it can be quite overwhelming. It can be quite baffling for small businesses to kind of get their heads around it, because there's a lot of legislation, and especially around the immediate rights from day one, that they're bringing about. They're still actually consulting about that to make sure that they've got all the guidance, but ultimately it looks like that 2-year period of a grace period that employers used to have previously to assess if somebody was right for a role is being reduced right down, potentially to day one, potentially to a 6-month probationary period. So it really will change how small businesses hire and manage the team, because you can't take as many risks when you're hiring anymore. You really do need to make sure that you're hiring the right person and you're effectively managing that probationary period. And if you don't, it can be really costly for small businesses. So yeah, I'm really focused at the minute on making sure that I support my clients with getting that right.
Okay, I mean, it sounds on paper, it sounds really nice for the employees to get all these rights from day one, and I'm sure many people out there are delighted about that. But I guess a lot of the people we're talking to in this podcast are the business owners, especially of small businesses, and I just wonder what do you think are the main business impacts that those organizations would face with some of this legislation, in particular around those new employee rights?
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer your question, it is a good thing for employees. And there are times where I've seen it myself that employers do abuse that 2-year rule that we seem to have at the moment. Um, it is a lot fairer, but it's also really difficult as a small business owner to assess if this is the right person for a role in such a short period of time. And it's also really difficult to understand how to follow a fair process in line with UK employment law. So what I find is that lots of small business owners have great quality conversations and they are managing performance, but maybe they just don't have the right documentation, or they aren't saying the exact right thing in a letter to somebody, even though they're having these conversations verbally. And that's what can catch people out. And tribunals can be really, really expensive if it gets to that point. And obviously the goal is to not get to that point with an employee, but you don't know what you don't know as a small business owner. And that's why the education around these new laws is so important.
That's really interesting. So you're finding that a lot of people have thought like the right idea, like they have the right principles,
Yeah,
maybe just not written down and in a
yeah.
way that is, would it be fair to say, would it be right to call it legally compliant, maybe?
Exactly. So I don't know a single business owner that comes in and says, I'm really going to try and break the law today, or I'm going to purposely try and hire someone just to mistreat them. Generally, it's always done with the best intentions. But then again, it's just that knowledge of how to fairly and legally compliantly manage that process. And it's just hard to keep up to date with the employment law as well. So there's changes to 0 hours contracts, how holiday pay is calculated, all things that if you've not kind of got someone advising you on the changes and how it impacts your business, it can be really difficult to kind of keep on top of as a business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking from my own experience as well, we've hired people, and of course, we have, as a business, we support a number of clients around the UK and in other countries as well. And for us, running a relatively small business ourselves, we just didn't have a lot of this paperwork.
Yeah.
Yes, there are sometimes templates you can get online, and that's lovely. But actually, half the time I've looked at these, they've got mistakes in them. They've got sometimes even grammatical mistakes. They're sometimes like really out of date. There's no one to ask to then check if the edits that you've made are right. I mean, it's a bit of a minefield, really, if you're just trusting yourself to a few dodgy templates that are available online, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it comes to things like your contracted employment, you can download those off Google or get some form of AI to draft them, but you have to be so careful with the contracted employment. It's one of the most important documents in your business, and it's just worth having it professionally written for you. I see that mistake a lot. And if it is getting to an employee dispute and the contract's not clear, it's just it's just painful for a business owner to think, oh, that could have been such an easy fix
Yeah,
early on.
and certainly you've helped us a lot in that type of situation. Where we've had not any major issues, but just where we've had some contracts that needed a bit of updating. They maybe
Yeah.
needed a few new terms tightened up a bit, maybe just made a bit clearer as well. So it's been really useful for that. So maybe just to go into some of the specifics. What do we mean by day one dismissal rights? How does that work?
So currently, the legislation is that, with the exception of discrimination, people have 2 years before they could take an employer to an employment tribunal for unfair dismissal. What that basically means is during that 2 year period, the employer could say, it's just not quite working out. It's you're not the right person for the role. There may not be really serious performance issues, but something's just not quite clicking. They can have that conversation and decide to let them go and issue the notice without going through like an extensive performance management process. Moving forward is looking like that's going to be just a probationary process, which is quite a short period of time to make sure that that person is right for that role. And so moving forward, you'll have to have a really tight 6 month probationary period and decide quite quickly if that person's the right person for the role. It doesn't mean you can't still manage people's performance. Of course, you can manage people's performance, but it's just a longer process, and it's quite a time consuming process for business owners. Again, a lot of people have these good quality conversations, but to follow a legally compliant performance management process, there is a lot of documentation, there is a lot of formal warnings and things like that that business owners like to try and avoid as much as possible. Currently is what I see, and that's
Mm.
obviously some of the places where that people go wrong. But yeah, it's just going to be a longer process, and it's just has more risks because that period where someone could take you to a tribunal is really reduced as well.
Yeah, and I guess at that point it becomes quite costly as well. And yeah, you're talking about the equivalent of many months worth of salary and
Absolutely.
some
It can
kind of
be really
compensation.
costly, and it can be really emotionally draining as well as a business owner.
Mm.
As I say, I really don't believe that business owners go into it to try and do things that are wrong. Of course, some do, but um, yeah, especially if it's more of a case of I didn't know that I have to give 2 warnings before this or something like that, that if you have a clear process in place can be really avoided.
Yeah.
That's what I really encourage, just to get your processes and your documentation in order. Really.
So I guess what I'm hearing as well is that it's not like you're going to be stuck with a sort of poorly performing member of staff right from day one for eternity. You mentioned about having that probationary period and
Yeah,
making sure that that's set up properly. I mean, this is
absolutely.
about, I guess, setting up an employee to succeed rather than to fail, right?
Absolutely. And even if it's past the probationary period, of course, you still need to performance manage your employees. And if they're not performing, then they're not fit for the business. And you can obviously lose employees in that way as well. But yeah, as you say, a probationary period really should be getting someone set up, getting them ready to go and ready for them to succeed. And in a way that this new legislation will really support that, and it actually probably will have a really positive impact once employers get it right, because there will be more focus on that probationary period and getting the skills in place and getting the support. So you should have employees who are up to speed quicker, which is a win-win. It makes the employees feel better. It makes you feel better as a business owner. So yeah, I just want to make sure that small business owners are informed, because these types of things are in place with big businesses who have a HR manager looking over it and making sure that managers are doing things correctly. It's just the small business owners that don't have that support that I really like to make sure that people are aware of what's out there in terms of employment law and what they need to be following.
Yeah, makes sense. And I suppose for a small business owner, I mean, it's to their advantage to make sure they are onboarding well,
Absolutely.
just so that the employee can do the job well and perform well, isn't it? So I guess the primary focus is on the small business owner or the employer to make sure there is suitable, I don't know, training and some process involved. But in terms of the mechanics or the structure around that, is that something you help organizations with as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely. And again, a focus back to what we were talking about initially is on the recruitment. You can't
Mm.
just be like, oh, this person will do. You need to really think about and have a process for who do you want, who's the right fit for the business, exactly what skill level do you have, what resources do you have in the business to train and upskill them, and really have a full assessment of that before you even go out to recruit, and not rush that recruitment process. Take your time, really develop core questions that can get to the root of what you need and what type of person you need, what skills and experience. And the slower you take and the more careful you are with that recruitment process, the more likely are to have a successful employees moving forward and being successful for your business. So yeah, really focusing in the recruitment and onboarding stages.
Yeah, that's great. And it kind of makes me think about anything really in business that it's kind of like if you put a lot of work into the research, the preparation, and all of these things, making sure you have everything in place. It's the same with for example, our marketing campaigns. You know, when we run campaigns for our customers, we in some cases we probably spend 70 to 80% of the time on the research and the preparation and getting everything in place, and then probably only about 30% of our time on the actual execution, and you know, most of the time that's what
Yeah.
delivers good results. And you know, we see a lot of agencies out there that are just trying to sign up customers quickly, do things quickly. So you know, try and do things at high volume. I wouldn't use the phrase, but you know, it's the throwing enough of something at a wall, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was marketing campaigns. That's literally what happens sometimes. You know, people are getting a very low success rate, but they do enough volume that it works. And I'm trying to sort of like equate that to hiring. It's not quite the same thing, I know, but
Yeah.
the idea that if you put the preparation in, you can do much less work. You can hire fewer people and hopefully get a better result,
Yeah.
or at least go through a shorter recruitment
Yeah.
process. Would that be fair to
Yeah.
say?
Exactly. And I tend to see in practice the actual opposite for recruitment. What I tend to see is um, Debbie in accounts is leaving. We need to hire a new accounts person right now. Okay, what did we do last time we were hiring accounts? Okay, there's the advert we did last time. Let's plop that on, and then we'll just try and find this again. Instead of taking a breath and going, what does the business need? Let's look at the let's look at the team. Where are the gaps? So how can we fill these gaps to make this team better? Do we need someone junior? Do we need someone senior? Do we need this role at all? Can we restructure the existing team to make sure that we can improve efficiencies? It's a really good opportunity when you're recruiting to be able to look at the whole team as a whole and see what you need. But I really
Yeah,
don't see that in practice very often, but it's definitely something I encourage with my clients. Don't just go like for like and see what
no,
you
that's
need.
great. And having that point of view, that's sort of it's almost like a second opinion in some cases, or an additional kind of perspective on the teams, what they're doing, are they deployed efficiently. I guess that's something you're helping your
Yeah.
clients with as well. And
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
maybe like you just said, the answer might be not to hire someone. It might be doing things in a slightly different way. And just on that point, there are lots of different models out there. Some people, I suppose, now might think that they will go down the road of a permanent hire. Now,
Yeah.
in some cases, when it comes to a business like ours, we're not so affected by some laws that say an individual contractor working as a company, some of the risks that they
Yeah.
have. But obviously, a lot of businesses might be tempted to go and work with sort of single owner, single person
Yeah.
company as a contractor. Would there be any risks involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, firstly, I do encourage that a lot with my clients. If there's not a full role available, how can we outsource this so that you still have the skills without the full headcount is always a great option. What they do need to be mindful of is things like IR35 regulation, which is basically to ensure that your contractor isn't actually an employee. And there's lots of criteria to be able to do this. The best way to probably check that is there's a checklist online where you can do IR35 checklist and answer a couple of questions, and it will tell you if they fall into the IR35 legislation. But
That's
generally,
great.
they need to be working for more than one company and kind of have autonomy over their own role in a way that an employee doesn't have. Well, yeah, contractors can be a really, really great option to help grow a business and even just as like a transition into hiring a full time person. And a lot of my clients use them for that as well.
Yeah, that's great. And we've seen it as well. So I should probably reassure our customers as well that when they're working with us and buying fractional services, we're covered from that point of view that we
Yeah.
we have teams and they are interchangeable, and that those issues don't really occur for our clients. But it is something that we do as well, is work with organizations to be the sort of filler of that gap on a temporary basis. And in fact, we've had many clients who work with us for a little while on a lot of different projects. And then over time, they'll reduce what they do because they've hired someone internally to
Yeah.
take on those projects. So as they grow, they've brought someone into the team. They've been able to justify the I guess it's the risk versus reward, and they've been able to justify that,
Yeah.
and then slowly they'll give that person more responsibility. We ease back a little bit, do slightly less over time, and it seems to work really well. And
Yeah.
it's a good very the people I've seen in those organizations that are involved in that process. I think they benefit as well because one, they get to learn a bit from people like us who are supporting them.
Yeah.
Um, Sort of in the background, but also, it's a more of a phased introduction. They're not suddenly dumped into the middle of a one-person marketing department
Yeah.
saying, "Here you go. Here's all of our social accounts. Here's our email accounts. Here's everything. Go and learn
Yeah.
it."
No, it's exactly the same for me. So I grow with the businesses I work with. So I had a business start with me that had 8 people. And you don't need a full-time HR manager for 8 people. They'll just be twiddling the thumbs most of the time. They need someone who's going to come, set up, make sure that you're kind of legally compliant and just be ad hoc on hand when needed. They've grown to like 38 people now, and we're looking for a HR manager for them because they've got to that point where they actually would benefit from that full-time resource. They're doing lots of recruitment, lots of forward planning, and lots of talent management. So it's like, okay, let's do a transition plan so that you can grow your business and have the right support through that. So yeah,
Yeah,
outsourcing works absolutely.
great. Yeah, and I suppose just going back to the idea of permanent in-house hiring, the let's call it the more traditional employment route.
Yeah.
Um, what I suppose maybe I'd like to get into what happens if if it goes wrong, so how can you potentially deal with people who are underperforming?
Yeah.
I think we often talk about toxic or disruptive people, things
Yeah.
like that. I'm sure you've got a ton of horror stories. I maybe should one as well. But I'd love to hear your insights on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, there's a really big difference. And this is what I say to anyone that I'm giving advice. There's capability on the behaviour side. So if someone's struggling because they've not got the skills and experience, and in that case, they just need some, well, if you've got the resources to be able to give them that time, attention, training to develop them, I'm good with that. I can do a supportive plan all day. But if it's behavioural that you're having the issue, that's when you really need to act quickly, because somebody who can do but is not willing to do is a lot more detrimental to your business than someone who is struggling a little bit but they're really trying. And sometimes you need to put actions in for both scenarios, but I would definitely say if you've got people who are quote unquote toxic in your business, you need to act quickly. So it's all about communicating, clearly communicating, and it can be quite hard to, especially with toxic behaviour, because it's not always at the surface. There's sometimes some underlying issues that you can't quite put your finger on. The key to it is really communicating and communicating potential impacts. So potential impacts that potential gossip could make, and just really addressing it head on and making decisions around if they're the right person for your business as these problems arise. But before
Yeah,
making any permanent decisions, i.e. dismissal, I would definitely seek advice just to make
yeah,
sure that you're doing it in a fair process. Um, yeah,
yeah.
because you don't want to put
Makes
yourself at
sense.
risk, but you also don't want to put up with bad performance or behaviours within your business either.
Yeah, there's only so far you can tolerate certain things, and I agree. Having worked in a number of organizations, and I'll be intentionally hazy with the detail here, but I've worked in a lot of organizations where there are people in the team who, for one reason or another, have an issue. In some cases, it might be that they thought they might have been getting a job that someone else ended up getting. It might be that they've got some issues at home that they haven't made anyone aware of, and
Yeah,
maybe they don't want to either.
yeah,
And I always try to approach with some empathy, and I try to kind of think, what could be going wrong for that person that's making them act out like that? What's happening that's driving that behavior? And is there anything we can do? First of all, is there something that we can fix? Is there something
yeah.
that we as an organization can do to repair that? Yeah, and if there isn't, then I guess having a more open conversation with the person, getting things out in the open is. Do you think there's any risks involved in doing that, particularly trying to be a little bit more transparent?
I think open communication is the best thing that you can do for your relationship with your employees and to your business, because I see it with companies, say, who have a sit down with their employee once a year or once every 6 months, and they do the annual review, and they wonder why people aren't performing. Well, it's because you're not having those frequent conversations. And the more frequently you have conversations, both performance, but also check-ins, how are you? How's
Mhm.
it going? Learning small bits about them, like, oh, it was this summer school play or something like that. Like, just knowing your employees on a personal level and
Yeah,
showing that you care can really build on that relationship. And when problems do arise or issues do arise, you can deal with them a lot easier. Just having that. When I say knowing them personally, there obviously is a line of what's personal
yeah,
and professional at work. But absolutely, yeah, frequent communication. And I'm a really big fan of being quite direct with team members. Really, what if something's not working? They need to be told. It's actually more harmful to kind of like hold on to all the things that people have done wrong and wait till the end of the month and say, get your list out and say, this is what you've done wrong and it's not working. Just frequent and constant communication, which includes praise when they're doing well, areas they need to readdress and work on, and things that you can work on together as well. But yeah, open communication is really important.
yeah. So it's interesting, and again, back to the point about this being, some of the legislation points. being more UK oriented as well. I'd have to say that people often say in the UK we're a little bit, more reserved, a little bit more
Yeah.
passive, passive aggressive sometimes. But this idea that we're kind of sometimes not wanting to confront issues
Yeah.
and deal with them. I mean, I suppose that could, without wanting to get into almost like a therapy session here, what it's like on an emotional level, people
Yeah.
are not wanting to confront the actual problems that are going on in their lives, and never mind someone else's life.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
perhaps that's part of it as well. Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of hiring people, it, it's not always possible to get these things out early in terms of in the interview process. You can ask questions, you can kind of get a bit of an understanding, but I think there's a limit sometimes.
Yeah.
Are there any like activities or anything that you might recommend to businesses to run, with teams, with small teams, with either as an entire business or as individual teams that might help them, initially try to build bonds and make teams work better together and to try and encourage collaboration, but then also to maybe try and spot those little
Yeah,
issues, toxic issues
absolutely.
before they come out?
Yeah, I actually encourage it in the recruitment stage. So if someone has a great interview, all they're really showing you is that they're good at having an interview. Um, so I will try, it will depend on each role what works, but always trying to have some sort of cultural based interview where you can involve someone else from the team or have them interact with someone else from the team, maybe in the face to face interview, have someone showing them around, or just you can do assessments for how they work under stress and how they behave. So you could have a task that's a real life task that's what would be actually be doing in their job, something similar, and seeing how they actually would do things rather than just how do you answer a list of questions that are quite generic. And so I really encourage that in the interview stage and getting different people's opinions. But
Oh,
as
that's
you were
great.
mentioning about team bonding exercises as well, it's really important to kind of have that time with designated time with teams, especially when you work remotely. And so if you're more of a remote business, and maybe people come in every now and then, it's great to have that focused team
Mm,
day where you do things like working on company values can be really supportive, having people nominating each other for awards and well dones and things like that, or to really build that team ethos is really helpful.
yeah, and I've been in some companies where that's done incredibly well, and some where it's done, I don't know, incredibly badly. So
It's got to
it's
make sense. It's got to make sense for the business and the culture, absolutely.
yeah, and I suppose it's about encouraging that human interaction and human kind of relationship. And
Yeah.
I suppose in a world where we're seeing AI get into everything that we do, from writing copy for blog posts in
Yeah.
sort of my world, right through to, I guess, perhaps even talking to customers with chatbots. I mean, if
Yeah.
you, are you worried about AI and how it might affect, I don't know, how businesses talk to their
Yeah.
staff, to their teams?
Yeah, I was laughing because it's actually funny. I'm in a process at the minute with a couple of businesses businesses who use code and the developers are using the code through ChatGPT, and we're having to actually put policies in place because it's the company's IP, it's their products that we're kind of just people just willy-nilly putting in through AI programs. So yeah, and being mindful of what you put into AI is definitely going to be more topical, I think in the next couple of years, something I'm already working on getting AI policies for my clients. But yeah, in terms of how you communicate as well, I don't know if you see it back and forth. You get an email sometimes off someone in your team and you think, it's a great email, but you didn't write that. And it can,
Right,
it, it can
exactly.
impact that connection, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the sort of term human resources as well. The degrees in the title as well, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
it's it's not
Yeah.
our resources. So, no, it's really interesting, and I think it's something that's going to probably evolve. Yeah, it does really worry me that we are increasingly seeing people communicating with each other in teams using AI, and managers responding to their team's issues with AI, and likewise, people writing to their managers
Yeah.
or other people involved, in with using HR, and it's just, sorry, using AI,
Yeah.
talking to HR using AI, and it's pretty scary as well. Not only from the point of view that information is going out into the AI model, and perhaps there's confidentiality involved, but I think we're losing the ability to communicate well with each
Yeah.
other. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I would absolutely. It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things as well when you've used an AI system to maybe write you a report. Are you as informed on that report as you would be if you'd have wrote it yourself? I mean, it's a great tool and it can be really helpful, but it does cause me some concerns for like practical application after some things are created through that. Whether the person actually kind of remembers what they've said they're going to do within this masterpiece that's been put together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, since saying that, I don't want to sound like I'm on a complete downer about AI,
No,
because there's been some great things as well. And I think I've got very used to the idea that I can run a meeting and not I can be focused on the people in the meeting and listening to the team, listening to
yeah,
their concerns, knowing that the AI meeting note taker that I've got
yeah,
in the meeting is taking all of the action points. And
yeah,
because you're on a premium license, you can also keep that confidential within your
yeah,
organization. So I think as long as you make sure the safeguards are in place, use it responsibly, I think it's sometimes got the ability to increase and improve
absolutely.
human
Yeah,
protection, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So no, I mean, this has been really interesting, and Nick, I'd really like to thank you for taking the time to
Cool.
talk through all of these issues. I mean, it's a really important thing for people to get right. And I did want to kind of maybe just end the conversation just asking you, what are some of those startup deliverables, or maybe not even for a startup, but for a small business that hasn't done it yet?
Yeah.
What are some of those deliverables that people often forget about? Maybe you could just quickly run through a small list of those.
Yeah, sure. And again, what I mentioned, contracts and policies. So there is a legal requirement to have a contract of employment and some policies. You don't have to have a whole heap of policies, but you do need a disciplinary policy, you do need a grievance policy, and you do need a contract. The rest are a really good practice. It helps you manage, it helps you make sure that you're legally compliant, but it's not the law to have them in place. What I find really helpful is for small businesses to have a checklist. I actually created a checklist, so I will send it you to pop in the show notes of everything that you need to kind of be legally compliant. And I also find it really helpful to at least have some form of chat with a professional about the structure of your business, to be aware of what employment laws might impact you and what might not. Um, so as I mentioned, the changes to things like 0 hour contracts might not affect many businesses, but it might affect yours. So it's good to know, because again, you don't know what you don't know. It's good to just kind of have that sense check for what do I need to be mindful of in my business.
No, that's great. And of course, lots of cases are different, and lots of businesses are different. Sorry, so there'll be lots of
Absolutely.
different cases to consider.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I guess all of those things that you just talked about and the list you're going to share, is that something you can help businesses with?
Absolutely. So I do tailored solutions for small businesses. So anything from hiring your first employee and just getting the absolute basics in place. So I'm trying to grow a team to 20, 30 employees. I can support that. So yeah, absolutely. We do the full range depending on what's required for the business.
Brilliant. Well, as you said, we'll make sure we share that list, and also we'll make sure we share your contact details so people can get in touch and start off on that journey. Whether, I guess, they just need, like ourselves, we needed a few documents, needed some advice as well. Actually, we
Yeah.
got very early on, which is invaluable because there were a lot of things I didn't know, which you've really helped me with.
Yeah.
All right, so if and advice and documents right through to, as you said, that kind of more permanent kind of retainer, where someone, like with ourselves, someone doesn't need a full-time
Yeah,
5 days a week HR person, but they just need someone there,
there when you
someone
need
that
it.
they need on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll make sure all of those contact details are there. People can get in
Amazing.
touch with you. But again,
Mhm.
Rebecca, thank you very much for taking the time. It's been really insightful
Yeah.
to chat with
Thanks
you.
so much. It's been great chatting, Tim.
You've been listening to Happy Hiring and HR Horrors, another episode in the Grow2Market podcast series. Check out the description for links to extra content, and I hope to see you again soon.